Hello tanks and tankettes, and welcome to a very belated supporter spotlight video, because yeah, my video output's just been rubbish recently because I've been feeling a bit rubbish recently, as I'm sure you are all aware. This is going to be just a pair of tanks videos, replays even, nothing too complicated, and in fact we're going to start off with a very simple game here indeed. The T25 AT being driven by I Am the One True Nub. The fixed casement tank destroyers, the US tank destroyers, they don't particularly have great accuracy, but the guns are generally pretty good for their tier, and they usually do pretty decent damage, especially when you're top tier and you get to shoot at a tank destroyer that's 2 tiers below you and you roll high enough to just instantly one-shot them. Thanks for playing Stug. I'm sure you had fun being one-shotted by a tank that's 2 tiers higher than you. Admittedly, that wasn't the best place to pull up to in a Stug, but even so, yeah, that can't have been the most pleasant experience for that player ever. This is, by the way, Old Pilsen. This is a, I think, 9.21 replay. Yeah, this one is, yes. I find it a lot easier to play replays prior to 1.0. I've mentioned this many times in the past. Post 1.0, the replays are real flaky. And I don't exactly know what the issue is. I know it's not necessarily an issue all YouTubers have been having. I've been saving my clients as always and not doing anything particularly different, but something about the changing client architecture or whatever means that yeah, there's a lot of them that just simply will not play for me, which is a pity because I'm sure I've missed some really good matches that way. Sometimes I'll get older replays to play on the current version of the client though, which is actually what happened with the second replay you're going to see in this video. So he's helped to take out the scout that was blocking them on this flank, although it wasn't much of a block, but they don't exactly have a lot of tanks on this flank. Most of both team is on the western side of the map. They've also discovered this VK, who put a pair of rounds into I Be the One True Nub while he was taking out that artillery, but can you blame him for wanting to take out the RT? The VK, however, I mean, they're in a decent position, but I'm not entirely sure what's going on. They shot Nub twice and then they go curiously unreactive, and they're definitely still there. It doesn't seem like they've crashed. You see a bit of movement from them, but they just kind of sit there and let the M6 and Nub shoot them, and that's that. And so that could have been a rather bigger threat with half of his health gone already, but as it was, not so much. All that's left now to immediately deal with is this Leopard, and thank you M6, that was very appreciated, who doesn't actually have enough pen to pen with his AP autocannon. So he was able to just plough around, put the shot in. He's not going to get the kill, but he might do on this T25 AT. There we go, right into the back, and it's just clean up at this point. His team on the western flank absolutely hammered them. They've managed to hammer them on this side, and it really is just clean up at this stage. Although that 90B is still alive, and we know exactly where they are because the Panzer IV, who was also on this side, advanced forward far enough to get spotted and taken out by them. And clearly that VK was also paying attention to where they were and pings the corner where they are in fact hiding. So although a whole bunch of people go onto the cap and seem intent on capping because it's a scary Swedish tank destroyer, yeah, it's not even one of the scary ones really, in a way this is good for Nub because it means he's got a very, very good chance of killing this remaining tank and getting himself a top gun, and it's a little bit more damage as well. So there we are, artillery actually helps him out there. I know that's a bit of a heretical thing to say, but it meant that he was able to get the killing blow after Artie shaved a bit of health off, and as a result of that, he got his top gun. He also got high caliber, a Pascucci's medal for killing the two Artie, and an ace mastery, all with just under 2,800 damage done. Not bad, and that actually put him, as you can see, comfortably at the top of the team. the reason why the damage looks not quite so impressive among the rest of his team is that on that other flank that it was really spread out amongst a whole bunch of people who survived. Basically, it wasn't really concentrated on just a few people who were left, as can sometimes happen. But nonetheless, he put that gun to fine use, was able to make that alpha damage count, make the shots count, and did very, very well. Next we come up to Menthel in the derp Sherman, and this is him going for the third gun mark. And the thing with doing that with a derp gun is that yes, you can spam a bunch of heat shells, but it's not necessary perhaps to actually do so. Well, for these mid-tier derps anyway. He's also got his cola on there and some other premium versions of consumables, but otherwise this is just going to be a pure HE derp fest. It is also a top tier game, which is, even a same tier game, it's all tier 5s, which is going to be good for him, but on the downside of that, the downside of playing tier 5 in anything at the moment, is that there's a very high chance of meeting a Lefebvre, and indeed there is one on each team, along with a Bishop, which is a similarly very fast firing artillery, and an AMX-13. Their own side also has the infamous M41, so we'll see how that does, although I think actually the M44 is more infamous at tier 6, but the M41 is no slouch. There is one thing, by the way, we've got a bit of just Kemp Bush at the moment, and him using this bush and firing down range at things, and also allies dying in rapid succession. You'll see why this becomes a bit more of an interesting game rather than just sitting in a bush derping things. But yeah, it's Pride Month, and this is, I don't know if I've ever really mentioned that as a thing in my videos before, and it's kind of like it's a thing that doesn't really pertain to the channel that much, to what I do, but I kind of felt like at least acknowledging the fact this year, or at least remembering to do it, because quite often in the past it has been like, oh wait, that was Pride Month that's just gone by, oh well, okay, bit late to mention anything about it now. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention it just because, you know, as a thing to acknowledge. And because, well, and here's a thing I don't think I've ever actually said on the channel before, but I am in fact bi myself. And it's kind of like, what does it pertain to with what I do? Not really a lot, but it's just, I don't know. It's just a thing I felt like I wanted to mention, and it's my channel, so I can. And there we go. I'm not about to start plastering rainbow flags all over the place. I mean, I have absolutely no problem with people that do, and there's a whole reason why it exists as a concept, because it's not like the rest of the year isn't like the whole news thing about what was it, some US people were talking about setting up like a straight pride month, and it's like, well, isn't that just the rest of the year? Isn't that why the US has like a Black History Month, for example, to highlight things that sometimes get a bit neglected? But anyway, the whole thing just struck me as a bit silly. But you know what? Sure, go ahead, have parades and things if you want to. Whatever. If you want to have a party to celebrate being straight, then quite honestly, I don't really see what the problem with that is. If you want an excuse to have a party, then by all means go ahead. Anyway, so things are getting a bit hairy. He's now the last one left alive. There is a Stug bit further back on this flank, but otherwise, yes, he is the last one left alive on this flank. The rest of his team have been rapidly dying. Artillery is blasting this location with Merry Abandon. He's got 2 heavy tanks, although one of them, there was a third one that has been taken down, and there's also a Stug up ahead somewhere to also worry about. And being in a medium tank, he doesn't maybe have all that much in terms of hit points and armour to work with, so he really has to be a bit careful and a bit sneaky. That KV-1 though is extremely low health, and it's not going to take a lot to finish them off. A single 105mm derp will do it, although they're being a little bit cautious. I mean, they've figured out he's got derp by this point. Derps are pretty damn common at this tier. and sometimes you'll even see them on, you know, KV1s, although that's a bit less common. It's much more likely to, you're much more likely to see them on this tank, or things like the Panzer IV or the Stug. But wouldn't it be funny if the T1 Heavy got a derp gun? I'm sure you would see a lot of people using that. Now it takes Menthol a little moment to notice the Panzer III-4, who is whizzing past on the mini-map, and it takes them a little moment to notice him. But fortunately for him, he gets a penning shot into the rear and obliterates most of their health, and so that second shot doesn't have to do much to finish them off. This has now stabilised things a bit, but only a bit. The KV-1 has died in the meantime. That T1 isn't looking that healthy. The Stug, if he gets a penning hit, and in fact if he gets a hit into the side or rear, he could one-shot them easily. But there's still that nasty artillery to deal with. There's still a Panzer IV, an enemy Panzer IV, up on the northern flank. There's still Wolverines somewhere, and of course that artillery to deal with. And this has now devolved into a bit of an artillery fest of people just trying to spot for their own allied artillery. And it's almost inevitable that it's come to this, with it being now a slightly longer match. We're now over, I think, roughly the average time. It's usually, what, about 6 to 7 minutes? Or at least that once upon a time was given as the average figure for a game of World of Tanks. It might be different these days, but yeah, it's sort of come down to this very, very campy game, and this is the stage where having good view range and good mobility is going to come in incredibly useful, but it can also all go wrong very, very quickly. So making sure he's not being spotted along the way, he moves his position, because he could sit there behind a bush and get blind fired all day long, but that's not going to do him much good. Or he could actually try and maybe climb up the hill a bit and catch the Stug and the T1 Heavy by surprise. But while he's enacting that plan, the Panzer IV moves up and takes out the extremely low health OI Experimental. And unfortunately, at this range, his derp gun doesn't behave nearly so well. The surviving Stug has also repositioned to deal with that Panzer IV, which is good in terms of protecting their artillery, because the artillery staying alive is going to be quite useful at this moment. But it's bad in that Menthol therefore then doesn't have the Stug backing him up, but he might still have some artillery directing their attention his way. And the fact that the Stug is there means that the T1 Heavy has quite likely also moved. It seems unusual that they would try and brave that themselves. Now, as it happens, he manages to derp the Stug through the front, which is very useful, but that T1 Heavy with its 76mm is still dangerous. That's only going to take 1 or 2 hits to kill him. You know, if it was a very high roll, then they might... Oh, actually, no, I don't know if they could roll high enough with that to kill him from 150 odd hit points. But it doesn't end up mattering, because artillery again saves the day. What is this praise for artillery? I've clearly been bribed to say nice things about artillery players today. And tracks the T1, and he's able to then keep retracking him until he gets killed by the gorilla. There is still that artillery to deal with though. And they have smacked him. One of them smacked him, what was that? The Bishop, right in the face for almost all of his remaining hit points. The only bit of good news is that both the Bishop and the Lefebvre have a very, very bad splash radius. But that's pretty much offset by the fact that on 14 hit points they don't need to do a lot of splash. They're also fast firing, especially the Lefebvre, and any hit at this point will kill him. The Lefebvre also has the incredible advantage for a tier 5 RT, in fact RT of most tiers, of having a 390 meter base view range. I'm sure you will find a lot of Lefebvre players having optics on their artillery. and maybe even some cruise skills to increase their view range even further. So if they're well hidden, there is an extremely good chance that they will spot Menthel before he can spot them. The bishop is less of a threat, but as we've seen, you know, a direct hit can still fairly hurt. So this is a little bit tricky, especially as the Stug seems to be remaining firmly in position to counter the Panzer IV-H, who as far as we know is still there. So the bishop takes a shot, and it's far enough away, it doesn't do anything. He's also spotted the bishop, and his allies are now, well, at least some of the arty, two of the arty are trying to help him out. And in fact, the Grilla is driving this way, which is an unusual sight for an artillery. I also left this in but sped up because it's during this period that the Stug kills the Panzer IV-H. They must have been fairly low health at that point. And so even though it is a guerrilla coming to help him, you know, that's still better than nothing at all. Even an artillery player distracting other artillery can give valuable seconds in which to get a shot off, which might end up winning a game. And we are getting down to it on time at this stage. So the guerrilla spots the bishop and kills the bishop. And as far as artillery duels go, I mean, the bishop was low health already. So that's quite nice for Menthel and his team, but there's still that dangerous Lefebvre to deal with, and the AMX-13, who presumably is much further back out their base. Now while the guerrilla's moving up, there's a good chance they are still spotted, because what's going to happen next is the Lefebvre, who has retreated a bit and is using bush cover and their superior spotting, is able to take them out. So it's not clear whether the guerrilla knew they were still specifically spotted by the Lefebvre, because they didn't get into an arty safe position and made themselves a bit of an easy kill. This is all left enough time for the Stug and their own Lefebvre to come down on this flank as well, although they're playing it very cautiously and letting Menthel basically do the spotting. And spot he does, he kills the AMX-13, which just leaves the Lefebvre. And for all the advantages the Lefebvre has, it is not a fast artillery at all. It is quite slow. It goes, what, 20-something kilometers an hour at max speed? And so, yeah, we can pretty much guess that they're still here just using cover at this point. And we can also tell by the fact that he's spotted and that shots have been fired at him already, or one shot, that they're pointing this way. And I think it is a little oversight of Menthel at this stage, which is maybe understandable given that there's not a lot of time and that he wants to get this game won. That instead of telling his allies he's looking my direction, move forwards, come up behind them and take the kill. He could have played it safe, sat behind the rock, but that might have been a bit dicey, and so instead he took his chances, came out. The Lefebvre fired because they were expecting it, but fortunately for Menthel it fell rather short and he was able to get the kill. So again, Pascucci's a patrol duty, high caliber, an ace tanker, and his third mark of excellence with 2,032 damage done, 4 kills and 1,360 base XP. That Stug actually managed to place second on the list. The damage wasn't all that impressive, but nonetheless, I think we can say that they did contribute something fairly important to that game overall. And also the artillery on his own team did also play a fairly instrumental part in winning that game. But overall, it was Menthel that did the most damage, quite easily. And considering how easily some of his allies died early on, it's a good thing that he was in a position to be able to step up and take the weight, as it were. So that's it for this particular video, and hopefully you have found it, enjoyable, entertaining, whatever. I'm really bad at this at the moment, can you tell? And if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath it. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.